welcome to tonight's live investor agent webinar. And again, also welcome to those of you who've been through some of the other programs like turning rental problems into real estate profits, rental problems without the pain, and flipping for profits without the risk. The wholesaling program, all the material has been created. It's in the process of being transcribed and edited and published, all that kind of stuff. So we're really looking at, I'm going to say easily February, February, 1, 2, 3, 3 months out is February, is what we're looking at. So we'll have that available for you guys. I made that last, really not necessarily was my call. It was what you guys wanted back in the spring. It was a pretty close toss-up between rolling out the rental problems, or turning rental problems into real estate profits program, and rolling out the wholesaling. So, there's one team of editors and publishers and developers we use because they have the right background for us, real estate related, investor related. So they're pretty good. So in any case, keep an eye out for that. For right now, though, welcome aboard to everybody, particularly the new folks. We should have some new folks online from Kansas and Missouri and Arkansas. So welcome aboard to all of you. And if you're listening to this in a recorded fashion, don't worry. Obviously we prefer to make them live as much as possible, but if you can't, you get the recording the very next day. And for all the new folks, a little bit of housekeeping here. You can see your question box. That's where you post questions during the webinar. Again, it is live. It's unscripted. So sometimes you hear things that, what we call the good, the bad, and the ugly. All right. And from time to time, I will unmute you. By default, everybody's in mute. Audio mute, that is. And I may unmute you from time to time, depending on the subject, the question, that type of thing. And everybody will be able to hear us have that conversation. So in any case, welcome aboard. And looking ahead here, we're going to meet again next week. Hang on, what night is that? Let's see here. Maybe we're not going to meet next week. Hang on, let me flip ahead and see. I thought we had a webinar next week. I know we have one the following week. Yes, we do. Next Tuesday, the 15th, is our next webinar. So let me write that in here. I don't know why it wasn't in there. But in any case, we'll do that one. We'll do one on the 22nd, and then we're not going to have one the last week of the month, I don't believe. Let me flip here to December. Yeah, because I'm going to be in some training, and there was no way to really work that out the least that we could see, although that's going to be heading into December anyways. I'll come out with the December schedule probably next week, if I'm not mistaken. So in any case, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Keep an eye out again for the wholesale program, and if you guys want to check out the others, just go to the website. All of you get the book for free automatically, whatever subject is you want. Just follow the instructions, you'll get that for free. And if it's something you want to pursue, let me know, because obviously the training you get for half price once you're an active student. So just keep that in mind. And also remember, if you bring somebody in with you, you can either take the discount or earn $250 per person per program. It's a great way to rack up some dollars and get a program for free if you'd like to do that too. So in any case, let's go ahead and move forward here, all right? We're going to move into the rental business for the evening. And by the way, we're not going to go over the rental property reporter, opportunity evaluator, or the cash flow worksheet, because we just did that a few weeks ago. If you want to look up that recording online, just go for it, grab it, and watch it and listen to it. And I think you can strip off the audio if you like. As a matter of fact, I know you can, and you can even watch it on your phone. Both are free apps that you can get. So tonight what we're going to do is we're going to focus on rentals, right? A couple different things here. When you're buying rentals, a lot of people think in terms of flipping. Well, you're flipping, you're looking for a home that has it's in need of repair, needs a little TLC, it needs to be rehabbed, and that's true. And in rentals, though, the truth is there's multiple ways to buy rentals. You can buy rentals the same way. You can buy rentals that are in need of repair, and you buy them wholesale, low price that is, and put some TLC in there and some money and some effort and energy, remodel, rehab, increase the value of the property, excuse me, and then rent it out. or you can buy what was called turnkey. If you buy rental properties that are turnkey, they're essentially already in service, they're up and running, and they're already producing income. Now, in most markets, okay, um, you can always buy turnkey properties. The best time to buy the properties that need to be remodeled and so forth are typically in your down markets. People, the landlords that were too highly leveraged are sometimes losing their properties for foreclosure, or you can buy them at a steep discount, remodel them, and turn them back on the market when you're done. Um, but regardless, if you want to avoid all those headaches, or most of them that is, and buy better properties, you can buy turnkey properties anytime, any economy, whether it's up economy, down economy. And essentially you're buying, you know, well, what people might say, well, I'm paying full price then. Well, not necessarily. You can get good deals. You have to work on how you're structuring the transactions, okay? Number one. Number two is, if you buy right and you buy in the right area, you often can increase the rents at a pretty good clip within the first year with just a few simple moves. And so what you're doing is you're buying the property with the plan to increase the income within the next year, thereby improving your performance on the property. Okay, that does fall within under the guise of buying turnkey. So in any case, that's really what we did discuss right here in this paragraph. The bottom line is when you're buying a property, guys, that a rental that does need to be rehabbed, what that means is that property's probably not going to be bringing in a lot of money while you're rehabbing it. Now, there is a hybrid approach, which is you buy a property that is fully rented, but it has the potential to be improved to a higher level of performance. So you don't have to have it empty. You can, let's say you have a fourplex, you can keep 3 units rented out and be remodeling the 4th unit. Okay, so when a lease comes due, instead of renewing it, you let that person leave and you remodel that unit, put it back on the market at a higher rent. And then the next time another lease comes up, you do the same thing. So the beautiful thing there is, while you own it and are remodeling it, it's always producing income for you. Okay, so that's something to consider when you look at properties that are up and in service and fully rented. Look for the ones that have potential to be improved and raise the rents to the next highest level, and jump on those all you can. Okay, me and a lot of other folks have made a lot of wealth and income by using that approach. So in any case, let's jump into how do we actually go about looking at these properties, okay? Working with the people or clients that are looking at them, and how do we do that in a logical fashion that's not going to cost us a lot of time, energy, and money, that is. Okay, so let's step into it. I'm going to go ahead and check for questions real quicker before I reduce my panel so that I can focus on the content. And once I get through this next section, I will go back to my panel and look for questions. So for the moment, we're going to kind of be in a little bit of a focus here. So let me go through this, and it does help for me to get through this entirely, and then we can go back and ask questions on this process. Okay, so I'm going to reduce my panel. Hang on 1 second. There we go. Now everybody should be able to see the full screen, including me. All right. So first things first, okay? Now, assuming you're an agent, most of you are agents, and you're going to be working with the landlord, the person buying the rental properties, okay? I mean, even if you're not, if you're going to be buying rentals for yourself, other than steps 1 and 2, the rest of it is the same. But let's assume you've got a brand new prospect. They're now a client because you've had them sign a buyer's agency agreement. You know that they want to focus on rentals. You know what kind of money, cash, and or credit that they have to work with. And you've done your homework from the first module. You know the areas to be in, the zip codes in the specific neighborhoods, okay, by using the school report and melissadata.com and your planning commission website to narrow things down to the best of the best areas, in this case, to buy rentals. So you're working with your client. You obviously do the interview. Okay, you have your telephone conversation with them, establish their goals, and obviously qualify them, okay? And then you have them email you an email back recapping the conversation and also providing all of their contact information. You've obviously already got their phone number, but now you're going to get their best email address, name, and I prefer actual physical address too, because you're going to likely need that down the road when you start filling out sales agreements. Okay, so there's the same physical address here, but you definitely want to get that. Now, assuming they followed your instruction, you've now got an email from them. You obviously want to do your buyer's agency agreement, okay? And once they do that, you can set them up on a search initially in your MLS system. Now, obviously, there's other ways to get inventory, okay? But for right now, we're going to use the MLS because it's the one tool that we all have in common to describe this process, okay? And later on, you can get inventory using other techniques, and if you're lucky, get those listed, and that becomes your personal inventory for listing purposes, and you can then sell them to your buyers, obviously. Okay, so you're going to set up your search, okay, based on everything that you understand to be the right criteria: the dollar amounts, the number of units, the sizes, the price range, the areas, the whole 9 yards. Now, what you want to do is always provide what's called the full listing. Don't just give them a skinny version. I know it's tempting to do that because everybody thinks, well, I'll give them the short version. That way they have to call me for everything. All you're doing is you're just adding work to yourself, right? You've already got them under agreement. Okay? And be honest with you, a more educated, informed consumer is always a better consumer. So give them everything. Give them the full listing that has all the information, all the details, because you're going to have them go through all this initial analysis, not you. And you can do it with them the first time, obviously, and you should be doing it yourselves, quite frankly, during the training program to learn the process. Okay, in other words, this process I'm teaching you here tonight, you should be doing this on your own, at least 3 times. And the funny thing is by the time you get to the third practice run of this, you're going to have it nailed down tight. It literally is like riding a bike. It's that straightforward. You don't budge from it. You don't fudge from it. You don't change it. You just do it exactly as it's put here. And within a matter of 3 or so practice runs, you'll have it nailed down pretty tight, and then you can show somebody how to do it. So in any case, back to this. You get all of the listings that meet your criteria. And let's say you've got 60 multi-units popped up in your listings. You're going to go through those properties, and your first objective is to cut that down to half, cut it into 30. And the way you go about it is it's very similar to what we did with the listings last week. However, the main set of criteria after pricing is satisfied is financial performance, okay? Not the physical condition of the building. That's going to come next. But see, when you're working with a flip, you go right into determining, after you determine the area is a good area, you go right into the physical condition of the property, okay? You look at pictures and so forth and so on, like we described last week. In this case, you obviously are going to be interested in the pictures and all those other pieces of information. But as soon as you get the obvious out of the way, you're going to jump right into the financials. So let's go ahead and dig in and let's talk about this. All right, first things first. Once you know what a reasonable fair market value is for the area you're looking at, like an average per unit cost, okay? And that's going to vary between 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, etc. All right, so once you know what that round average figure is, now you can look at list price. Okay, and if the list price is below what you perceive to be fair market value for that type of property in that area, then you're going to keep that property for more observation, for more analysis. If the list price is higher than what you believe is fair market value for that property in that area, then you discard that listing. You literally throw it away, all right, or turn it over and make it scrap paper. Okay. Now, once you've done that, now you've narrowed your list down dramatically. You've got rid of all the ones that economically just don't make sense to look at. Yes, you can look at them and make really low offers, but you really beat your head against the wall. You're better off focusing on the properties that are already priced reasonably or favorably and work only with those owners, because you got a much better shot of getting offers under contract and you earning a commission. Okay? So first things first, again, is list price versus perceived value. Now the next thing you do is you take it at first glance at the photos of the property, the lot size, the room sizes, other characteristics, to really obvious things. So if you look at that and it just looks like a real piece of junk, you discard that. Okay, now you're left with even fewer properties. Now on these final set of properties, this is now your third pass through these properties. So again, it's going to take a few passes. Now you're looking at financial data. Now, let's say you're lucky and the listing agent provided you all the financial data. And by the way, if you ever look at any of my listings for rental properties, you'll see I put all the data in there, all the financial data, every single bit of it. Because I learned in the past that when I do that, I get more qualified callers, okay? The people who don't like it or don't want it are going to look at all the financials and to realize that they're working with a pro, and then they're not going to be able to pull the wool over my eyes or make me some ridiculous offer or what I call smoke and mirrors, okay? It's not going to work here. They're going to know they're dealing with a professional. So let's say, though, that you don't have all that information on your listing. The listing agent didn't provide it because they maybe don't know what they're doing, okay? They don't think it's important. They think, like a lot of mistakenly, a lot of other agents, oh, well, if I don't put this information in there, then they'll have to call me. Well, that's not true. They're losing a lot of business. You'll get more calls and better qualified calls when you provide the information, right? So let's say they don't, though. Just be devil's advocate here. What you want to do is email the agent. Yes, you can call them too. I prefer to email and tell them in the email, we've gone through our initial analysis. This property has made the cut to do further analysis. In order to do that, we need financial data on the property. Please provide a pro forma showing the income and expense for that property at a minimum for the last year, if not the last 3 years. Now, a lot of good agents already have that available to them. And sometimes, nowadays, by the way, you can add that as an attachment to the listing. You can add that type of data in an attachment to the listing that your prospective other buyer agents can pull down, okay? So in any case, assuming you get the data one way, shape, or another, all right? What you do is you take the information, look at the income, look at the expense, and you're going to go through, maybe use like the cash flow worksheet initially. Remember the cash flow worksheet? It's in your training manual. That's the simplest way to determine profitability for a rental property. It's the easiest, fastest one. It's cash flow worksheet. Plug in these values, plug in the rents, okay, plug in the expenses, and see what comes out the other end. If it looks like a winner, then you're going to keep it in the good pile for further analysis. If it doesn't, you're going to drop it right then and there. And don't worry about it. Don't come back to it. It's not going to be worth your time, all right? The other thing you're going to do is you're going to compare the figures that they're providing with what you believe are fair market figures for a similar property in a similar area, okay? So if you look at rents, for example, now I used rents for an area where the average home price, I believe, was $115,000. So you can see the rents in this area are lower than what a lot of you are used to. I know I spent several weeks in Toronto, Ontario this summer, and people are paying easily $1,680, $1,800 for a little one-bedroom apartment, okay? In some areas, it's even more than that. And yet you go down to where I was in the last week, parts of Arkansas, parts of Tennessee, and here I am now in the panhandle of Florida, and people are paying, you know, maybe between $750 and $950 for a three-bedroom. Maybe they're paying between $650 and $850 for a two-bedroom. And maybe they're paying between $400 and $600 for a one-bedroom, okay? The bottom line is you should have a pretty good idea of what are reasonable rents or fair market rents for your area. And it's easy to determine, and I want you to write this down, okay? All you have to do is go online every Saturday morning when you wake up having your coffee, go to Craigslist and see what's being asked for the rents, okay? And it should give you the areas. It'll say, they'll tell you what area the rental's in, and you'll look at the average rent, the size of the property, you know, how many bedrooms it is. And you should be able to determine what are the going rents for that type of property and that type of an area. You can also go to look in your local publications, okay? Again, neighborhood newspapers, Green Sheet, Penny Saver, that type of thing. If you're in Canada, obviously you're going to use Kijiji and in your local publications. You can also get printed material from like your local mall or grocery store where people have rental guides, look in the rental guides and see what people are asking for those properties. Now remember, the rental guides are generally going to have apartment complexes in there and not necessarily duplexes and things like that. It's okay, you're just looking for a range, a small range of values, okay? You can also, if you're a member of your local board of realtors, which most of you are, you can find out who your local rental association is. You usually have an association, they're like an apartment association of Metropolitan Atlanta, AAMA, okay, or Apartment Association of Toronto, AAT. Okay, and what you can do is call them and ask them what the latest figures are for rents. Another source is this, guys. You can write this down, city data. You can go to city data, just Google city data in your area, and then there will be lots of valuable information, including what the rents are for the different size of, 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom, different types of properties, right? So lots of sources of data, but the bottom line is this, is you're looking not just to see if this property actually will cash flow, but you're also looking to see if the figures provided are reasonable for that area, because you want to be what we call in market. Okay, if you're priced too high or priced too low, you're technically out of market, and you might have a challenge with that property down the road. Okay, so in any case, I think we beat that horse to death there. The bottom line is you're looking at the income and expense profitability for that property. By the way, if you think there's reason to improve those figures, then obviously keep this in a good list. Let's say it's marginal now, but you believe from what you've seen that that has a lot of potential for improvement. You obviously want to keep this in a good list. Okay, now when it comes to the average cost per unit, again, this is going to vary widely. I just use an example here, and as a matter of fact, I made the note, excuse me, different areas will have vastly different pricing models. Study your area and make adjustments accordingly. So generally speaking, you should also be able to determine a ballpark figure of a per unit cost. So let's say you're looking at a triplex, 3 apartments in one building, and you've got a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, and a 3-bedroom. Okay, in this example, the average 3-bedroom was maybe going around for $35,000. In other words, within that 3-bedroom, 3-unit building, the 3-bedroom will be worth about $35,000 of the total value. The 2-bedroom will be worth roughly $30,000, and the 1-bedroom roughly $25,000. That's a total of $90,000 for that triplex. Okay, and what you're looking for is looking at other listings that are active, that are pending, that are sold for triplexes, and see what they're selling for, the average cost per unit. And you really have to pay attention to how many bedrooms are in those units, because that is going to affect the price. Okay, so again, these are just sample figures. I mean, again, in your area, I mean, my gosh, there's I know there are places in Florida. When I was down there investing a while back in Central Florida, and people were paying about $100,000 per unit. Like in a 10-unit building, they were spending $1 million on that building. Okay, then you had other areas where in a 10-unit building was going for $300,000, like in this example here. Okay, you just have to understand, and up in the Bronx, Queens, and Brooklyn, where I was back in September, you might have to spend $500,000 on a triplex. Okay, somewhere between $400,000 and $600,000. So in any case, it's going to vary by area, but so will the rents. So everything is relative. What I'm trying to give you here is a formula to follow, and then you've got to plug in the values for your particular area. So in any case, also remember that there's other variables. Like if you're buying a property turnkey versus rehab, that's going to affect some of this step number 5. All right. If it's something that needs to be rehabbed, obviously you're going to be going low on some of these figures. Okay, and you can project high. So go in low and project high. If the property is fully turnkey, it doesn't need a lot, doesn't have a lot of deferred maintenance, so you're gonna basically go in higher. Okay, and your projection should be aligned with where you currently see the property performing now. Bottom line is you got to develop instincts, guys. And the way you do it is by practice, by practice, by practice. So you should do this on your own at least 3 times, I believe, before you cut loose on the actual clients, okay? Okay, so we get through step 5. We've narrowed everything down to the final list of properties, and you're going to have your client send you the final list of properties that made the final cut. And when it comes to rentals, you know, I don't even like to look at 7 rentals in a day, 7 individual properties, that is. You know, if you're looking at duplexes and triplexes and fourplexes, you know, you'd be lucky to get through 6 properties in a day. And you should not look at more than 6 properties in any given day anyways, because the human brain is incapable of absorbing, you know, compiling, retaining information on more than 6 properties. That's what we've determined in this business. In the case of rentals, you're going to spend more time per rental property than you will like on a flip property, okay? But the bottom line is you have your clients send you the MLS number once they make the final cut. You're going to review their homework and maybe cut it down further, okay, if you see things you think they missed. And then obviously you're going to schedule appointments to go see those properties, right? So you schedule appointments, you go look at all the properties, and by the way, I'm going to let you guys catch up here for a second. Hang on. So you've got you've looked at these properties with your clients. Now let's assuming you've gone out there, you've looked at 7 rentals, okay? You really push the envelope on this. As you're going through the rentals, your client should have with them all of their notes, the projections, financial projections, and so forth. And they should be taking notes on the properties as they walk through them, okay? And the good news is, at the end of the day, what you're going to do is you're going to review that information with them, okay? You're going to, what I call, review their homework again, and you always do that, guys. This is very important. Never leave the scene without doing a summary review of the properties right there on the spot. In other words, you don't want to say, hey, great day, let me know when you've looked at all this and call me when you're ready to move forward, or whatever you want to do. Don't ever say that. Say, let's review these now, okay? So you're looking at them after the last property. Maybe you go to a local Starbucks, or you just do it in your car, or if you have a truck, you pull down your tailgate, whatever the case is, okay? Or if the last property is empty, you can do it inside the last property. And you pull out you have your clients pull out all their notes, and you pull out the listings that you keep with you, and you put them on a table, for example, side by side. Now there's 2 approaches here. You can either look at them side by side all at one time, or you can only look at 2 at a time and always compare just 2. And within that one-on-one comparison, just comparing 2 at a time, you always ask them a question. When it's all said and done, if you could only get one, which one would you go after? And you pull that one aside and throw away the other one, okay? Now, if the other one ends up being a really good deal, obviously you keep the information on it, and you may have another client who may want to buy that after this client is under contract. Okay, so you do your side-by-side comparison, and what you're looking to do, guys, is you're looking to have them narrow it down to 1 and no more than 3 properties, okay? Once they've done that, then you tell them, go ahead and go home. Please review your notes, review your calculations, and I'm going to call you at 9 o'clock tonight. And before I call you, please scan and email to me your final projections. This is you speaking to the client, and they do. Okay, now they should have the cash flow worksheet, the cost sheets, of course their MEO worked out on the final 3 properties, or the final 1 if you actually narrowed it down to 1. Then you get them on the phone to review everything, and you confirm everything. And if they're looking at 3, obviously you have to, and they can only buy 1, you have to narrow that down to the final 1. So you ask them side by side, which one, if they can only buy 1, do they absolutely have to have, okay? And you always state it in the positive, because what you're doing here is you just created the situation, the environment, where it's expected that they're going to make an offer, which is obviously why you're in this business, okay? So you do that process, you narrow it down to the final 1, you say, okay, great, I'm going to draw up the offer, I'm going to send it to you in less than 15 minutes, please print it off, or if you have DocuSign, sign it, return it to me with a scanned copy of your earnest money deposit, what we call your hand money check, and a copy of your most recent proof of funds. Okay, so now you can turn that around and provide a full offer to the listing agent on this property. Okay, and you want to do that that night so that when that listing agent gets in the morning, they have it submitted. They can submit it to their client for approval, either acceptance or counteroffer or rejection, whatever the case may be. All right, and that night you should send them an email. If it's not real late, yes, you can text them. I just prefer to email them, say, I got one coming your way. It's in your in-basket now. Please get back to me tomorrow. And you got your offer made. So this is how you do it, guys. And if you go through that process, the reality is about 2/3 of your offers will be accepted. Though you might have to negotiate a little bit, but you're going to get them accepted to the tune of 1 out of 3, which is way, way better than a lot of the other techniques that the investor gurus are teaching, okay, because they're not used to being on the brokerage side. And number one. Number two is they're always teaching no money down techniques. So they have to make those crazy offers and do smoke and mirrors and things like that. So in any case, let's have a hypothetical situation here. Let's say you get through all this, and there really are 3 properties that make sense, and your client's only buying 1. What should you do with the other 2? Well, that's right. You should send them to your other investors and say, hey guys, we got one under contract today. There's a couple that we're not able to purchase. Take a look at these because these definitely made the cut. And the third possibility is maybe you buy one yourself, okay? So as you guessed it, this is a great way to have a lot of legwork done on your behalf. Actually, it's the investors doing it for themselves, but you benefit because they can't buy everything, and you may be able to get a commission out of this or buy your own property, all right? So let me do this. Let me do a quick pause and bring back my panel and look for questions. So hang on 1 second. Let me go back here. Let's see. This is, hang on 1 second. Let me trying to figure out who's actually asking this. Hang on 1 second. Oh, Wanda. Hi, Wanda. Wanda, hang on 1 second. Let me get back to the question panel. Wanda says, okay, the listing agent is on the full listing. Have you found that to be a problem with just beginning with someone? So Wanda, yeah, we know that, but the bottom line is if you do this correctly, it's not going to matter because you have these folks under a buyer's agency agreement. I would never provide a full listing to someone who's not really a full-fledged client of mine, who I did not interview and qualify. So if you go through all these steps where you interview them, you qualify them, they're your client. Okay, the reason I like the full listing is it has a lot of other information on there. Okay, things that a lot of times that they're going to call you and ask you for, it's going to take up time that you don't really necessarily need. You can use that for other purposes. Okay, but I do get that question a lot, and quite frankly, we've never had a problem with that. Any of the students actually, just because of the way we go about this process. And if you're going to be working with existing investors who already conditioned to work a certain way, you're going to struggle. Remember, the way we go about our marketing is we attract new or newer investors that we know are predisposed to want to invest based on certain markers, and you build that relationship from scratch with them. So you build that up over time, and it's long term. I mean, lifelong relationships. So in any case. That's basically how that works. So let me go back and see what other questions we have. Actually, I think that was it. Good question, Wanda. Okay, if you look here, you'll see the next thing I bring up is always use your forms from your local board. Don't ever get caught in that trap of using some internet forms from that are not that do not come from your board. The reason is your board's forms have all been pre-approved all the way to the state Supreme Court level. They've also been determined to meet the plain language laws, okay? And if you grab a free contract off the internet or your client sends you one, just tell them you really can't use that, and they shouldn't be using it either, because only the state's Board of Realtor forms are the ones that pre-approved at every level of court in the state all the way to the Supreme Court level. Those board approved forms are neutral in nature. However, you can add addendums to them to customize them for your client, okay, to improve your leverage on that transaction, if you will. So, but you always start with a basic form coming from your state board of realtors, right? The other thing too is the plain language laws, the ones that come off the internet. There's no guarantee they meet the plain language laws. So here's the scenario, because this has actually happened. Consumer goes into court, a landlord who's selling a property, and another investor who's a landlord buying the property, and there's a dispute, and they use one of those short version internet forms. A judge could easily look at that and say, you know what, I don't recognize that form. It's not. In other words, when he says he doesn't recognize it, he means officially the court's perspective is they're not going to allow that form. They're not going to submit it because it's not supported in the court system. It hasn't been pre-approved. All right. And I'll give you another example. This happened with another landlord, actually, by the way, who was evicting a Section 8 tenant, and he won at the magistrate's level. The landlord did, and the tenant appealed, and it went to the court of appeals, and the landlord won again at the arbitration level, but the tenant appealed again, and it went to the court of common pleas, which runs the arbitration level, by the way. Got in front of this judge. The judge looked at the Section 8 lease and told the owner, he said, you know what, this lease is really, I don't acknowledge this in my court. You've got to go all the way back and start over again at the magistrate's level, okay? And this is a horrendous deal. I mean, this was basically a shame. I don't want to mention names. It actually was all in the papers. It went national because the Section 8 leases come from Housing and Urban Development, which of course is one of the federal departments, okay? Department of Housing and Urban Development. And anytime, see, the way law works is anything you write in a contract can't contradict any state level, local level, state level, or federal level laws. At the same time, local courts are supposed to not be able to make any determinations that run counter to state or federal laws. And just like states should not be doing anything that runs counter to federal laws. But that stuff actually does happen. And that's what this judge did. So the moral of the story is use your state forms and don't even allow yourself to get in the position of finding yourself in a quandary in a court hearing. Because remember, most courts will look upon the consumer, i.e. or tenant, okay, as being less sophisticated than you. And you will find yourself at a tremendous disadvantage. Very few judges are pro-owner. Some of them are, but a lot of them are pro-tenant. Okay. In any case, enough said on forms. Let's go ahead and move to the next thing, which happens to be dealing with lease options. Let's go there. All right. Now, here's what happens with a lease option. All right. Here's what it is and how we use it. First, let's talk about what it is. All right. A lease option is a two-part relationship. The first part is a lease, i.e. a rental. In other words, you're going to lease a home or an apartment to somebody, okay? The second part is what's called an option. And what that is instead of a sales agreement, you're providing an option agreement to this potential purchaser. And what they're doing is they're not purchasing the property, they're purchasing the right to buy the property at a future date. Now, some of you are thinking right now, well, that sounds like rent-to-own. It's similar, but it's not the same. In fact, we do not advocate rent-to-own at all. We don't advocate it. We don't teach it. And here's the reason why. When you do a rent-to-own agreement, guys, what's happening is number one, these people are making some kind of deposit. Typically, it might be small. But also, you're telling them that a portion of the rent is going towards the purchase of the property. And therein lies the problem. As soon as you give somebody what's called equitable interest in a property, okay, and they default on the lease, if you go to court to evict that person, the judge is going to say, I can't hear this case because this tenant, the defendant, has equitable interest in the property, even if it's $1. If they paid $100 in rent and you applied $1 to the purchase of the property, that's considered equitable interest. And you have to go to the court of common pleas level to now foreclose on that property, on that tenant, okay? Not just evict them, but foreclose on them. And you're looking at a minimum, probably 13 months, even in the best states, okay? to actually get that person out and get your property back. So rent to own is a huge, I just don't do it, all right? Lease option, on the other hand, is the lease part of this relationship is a straight lease. Not $1 of rent is ever applied to the purchase price of the property, not one dime, okay? And the option fee that they pay is a non-refundable fee. In other words, they're paying a certain percentage of the overall sales price in the form of an option fee. They're purchasing the option, and that option is the legal right to purchase the property at some future determined date. Okay, the option fee does not get applied to the purchase of the property. It's non-refundable, and the reason this works is, number one is you're holding this property off the market for, let's say, a year. Let's say your option period is a year. In the period of a year, the property should, in most cases, go up in value. So you're locking in the price at the current day market value, agreeing to sell it at a future date when the property is probably going to be worth more. But you've taken off the market for the benefit of this consumer who's going to purchase it at a later date. Okay? Now, when they eventually do get to purchase it, let's say in a year's time, they've improved their credit, whatever the case is, they saved up some money. By the way, you become one of their biggest creditors because you're leasing an apartment to them or a house. Okay? And that's going to help their credit rating, by the way, and also help them state their case to a bank, to a lender, because a lender is now going to see they're already in the property. They have the option to purchase it. They've been paying rent there, okay, and they've been paying regularly, faithfully, every single month, month in, month out. So you're actually going to help them improve their credit, and it's going to help them get the property, all right? By the way, the fact that they have possession, which does come in a lease, by the way, is one of the other rights of ownership. So in any case, bottom line is, the obvious goal for them is to exercise their option to purchase by the time that year is up, if you did a one-year option period. Now, let's say they don't. Let's say that they don't end up purchasing a property. They can't get a loan, whatever the case is. You have a couple of different avenues you can take here. You can either extend the option period or have them purchase a new option altogether, okay, both for a fee, okay. You could do neither of those and just let the person move out, because remember, all they were was a tenant. They have no equitable interest in the property. They're just gonna move. You get the property back to either try to sell it again, or rent it, or do another lease option. I've had properties, I've done as many as 3 lease options on the same property before somebody finally bought it, okay? A couple of other added benefits are, you can generally get full price, whatever your listing or asking price is, you'll get that in the option agreement, okay? You don't have to negotiate, typically. While the person lives there, even though they're technically tenants, you make them in a lease responsible for all maintenance and repairs. You know, anything that's considered a capital improvement, you should probably keep yourself, like if a roof, you know, caves in or the furnace goes, what have you. I know you don't want to hear that, but I've had people try to include that in the tenant's responsibilities, and they got shot down in court, okay, because they were considered capital improvements, not just expenses. But in any case, the bottom line is, the tenant's going to pay all the insurance, everything, you know, maintenance, repairs, gas, electric, water, you name it. So it's almost like a net lease agreement. More of your income is going to be kept to you by you for profit. Okay. Now a few more things here. If they do end up following through and purchase the property, you get your money then, and everybody's happy. But let's go backwards. I want to just give you some scenarios of why we do this and why it's how it comes on the scene here. Let's say you have a flip, or your client has a flip, and for some reason it's not selling, and they're starting to panic. Okay, you can either rent the thing out for them, okay, and then they've just bought themselves time. But if it doesn't make sense to rent it out, they just simply can't choose that option. They might be interested in a lease option. Okay, so you find somebody who wants to buy the property, but right now they need to rent it. Lease option is a great alternative. It's like a hybrid approach. And then what you do is you tell the owner any option fee you can get from this prospective buyer, and currently they're now obviously going to be a tenant, Um, you split that option fee. The owner gets half, you get half. That gets applied to your commission, okay, on an eventual sale. The reason we do that is this: if you decide to wait till the final sale to go through, what if it doesn't go through and you've got nothing? So you at least get some commission for pulling this thing together, okay? Um, by way of splitting that option fee. So in any case, you might have an owner who just for whatever reason can't rent it out. They didn't flip. They can't rent it out. The lease option might be a valuable alternative. Or let's say you're somebody who wants to sell a rental property, okay, um, and they're not getting any real takers. Like they're not getting the price they want. What you could do is say, well, look, let's lease option the rental property. Say it's a fourplex, okay? You find a landlord who wants to buy a fourplex, and maybe they don't have the money for a down payment. They can't exactly get a loan right now. They've got too many other rentals, and their name's on too many loans. You can do a lease option on a rental too. And what happens is the person who's the option person, in other words, they're leasing the building from you. So it's a 4-unit building. Let's say they're going to lease it from you for $4,000 a month, and they're getting $1,000. You're getting $1,000 per unit per month for rents. So what happens is the rents go to the new person, the person doing the lease option. They collect all the rents. They send half to you, okay, and they can keep half for themselves. It's I'm just throwing this out there. All right, but basically they're going to take over the role of the landlord is what I'm getting at. And they manage all the calls. They basically are managing the property, and they're not getting paid. They do get to keep a portion of the rent, okay? But you get your rents in a net condition. They just come to you. You don't have any headaches, any worries. And at the end of the year, they might have enough money saved up to make a down payment. Maybe their credit's improved, and they can then take over the ownership of the property. So there's a couple of scenarios of where lease options come in. All right. What I want you guys to consider is this: if you're an agent and you're going to help a lease option come to fruition, you got to think about who you're serving. Technically, you're going to be, in most cases, you're serving the owner of the property because you're trying to help them sell a flip, for example, and it's not selling. A lot of times, though, you will, in fact, represent the buyer, too. Okay, you want to make sure you're collecting your commission on both sides of that transaction. Again, with a lease option, you're not going to get all your commission right up front. That's why you want to take a portion of the fee, okay? A portion of the option fee, that is, all right? So in any case, let me do this. Let me slide my panel back over and see if we have any questions on lease option. Because sometimes this throws people for a loop, but it is an awesome strategy for properties that don't go the way you want them to go. Hey, by the way, while you guys are typing in questions, let me remind you of something here. When you're remodeling a house for flipping, okay, and let's say this is your client doing this, and they determine halfway through the project that they changed their mind, they're running out of money, they don't want to complete the remodeling, and they just want to rent it out. Well, number one is you got to get the property in rentable condition. You can't leave it in the middle of a rehab project. Okay, number two is all the materials, all of the craftsmanship, everything that's been predetermined has all been based on that property being a flip. And generally speaking, you're going to use better materials, better craftsmanship, okay, better design, the whole 9 yards for a flip than you will for a rental. So what's going to happen is you may have spent too much money on the property and your rents are not going to justify, they're not going to cover all the costs, all right? So generally going from a flip to a rental often does not work that well, okay? And that's why a lease option may be a valuable alternative, okay? Because you get generally better tenants who are willing to pay more money, et cetera, et cetera. On the other hand, let's say you have a rental, you may decide down the road you want to flip. Well, that's not a big deal because everything you put into the property has probably been more than well covered by the rents coming in, all right? And by the way, yes, you can flip rentals like we described earlier. But what you can do is, in the case of a lease option, is what we described earlier. Let's say you do want to flip it, but no takers in its current condition and all that kind of stuff. You find somebody who's willing to lease it from you and buy it on an option, and they buy it a year later through the option agreement. So there's a number of ways to skin this cat, a number of ways to make a deal work. And lease option is a very viable alternative to flipping and renting properties, and just certainly is a way for you to cash in on that too as an agent. So in any case, I think that's it, guys. Those are the two things I wanted to cover tonight. Let me scan here for questions one more time. Hang on one second. Okay, looks like we're okay. Let me just go back through just to make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay, we are all caught up and all done on questions. How about that? We actually finished early for a change. Normally we go over. So in any case, guys, thank you for participating tonight. We will see you next week. What did I say that was? I think I said that was the 15th. Yep. And I will be back in Atlanta. How about that? For all the folks from Atlanta, I'll be back in Atlanta next, let's see, Sunday night through Wednesday. Wednesday night I drive to Asheville, North Carolina. So for all you folks from Hendersonville and Waynesville, I'll maybe see some of you guys in the Asheville area. All right. So, okay, thanks guys for participating tonight. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week. Enjoy this crazy, beautiful weather we've been having. All right. And we will see you next week. In the meantime, God bless you and take care.